TikTok. Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's evening show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConaughey. Good evening to you all across all our digital streaming platforms in this country and worldwide. And hello to everybody also on TikTok. Send us your comments, please, and please send us your greetings. And how are we doing on this great British evening here in our wonderful United Kingdom? Nice to see Derek says, well, hello there. Please keep watching, Derek, and look forward to chatting with you on the programme later tonight. And to Debbie also, hope things are good at your end, Debbie. And Alan, good evening to Alan. Alan was the winner of our competition last week. And please, if you've not entered our competition, it's an easy thing to do. It will be coming up at 7:30. All you need to do is send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. And if you can send your answer to that, we will see you and we will announce the winner at the top of the hour, which is 8 o'clock. So we want people to enter our competition for this fantastic little tin of mints, luxury mints, but you get a tin, a Union Jack tin, which is absolutely fantastic. Hi to Morwena, good to see you. Morwena, hope things are well down in the south of our great country. And Alan Ford, and to Tommy. Always good to see Tommy in the programme. Alan says he might have one of his prize sweets now. Well, you deserve it. You won them last week. Absolutely. Good. Well, quite a bit to talk about this evening. Good to see folk on TikTok. Oathbound makes a mention about the war, isn't it? Well, it's an interesting thing that's happening there on the Ukraine. We're going to stay out of the whole Ukraine-Russia thing. We've got enough to bother about at the moment. Hopefully Britain will stay out of all of that as well. But if you've any comments on that, send it in. If any of us know what's even happening out there. And quite a bit was happening today in the houses of Parliament, because the SNP man Ian Blackford was making a comment about Boris's problems with the cake situation, you know, and the party, and he was saying that Blackford was complaining that bills were going up while the Tories, quote unquote, eat cake. And by doing so, he was making a reference to Marie of Antoinette, who is meant to have said that the peasants could eat cake, by which she did not mean, by the way, sugar-coated happy birthday cakes. She meant what we will understand today as just a kind of meal. They called it cake back then. Anyway, he was making an allusion to that, whereupon Boris stood up and he had a dig at Blackford, and he goes, well, I don't know who's been eating the most cake. Okay? And that was a little dig at Blackford, of course, and it was a fair comment. Okay? It's a fair comment because, you know, I've heard that when Ian Blackford walks down the beach in his local constituency, the Coast Guard actually have to come up to him and say, Mr. Blackford, could you hurry up now because the tide wants to come in? So it's a fair comment. It's a fair comment about Blackford, but of course the SNP and its supporters have been going terrible about how this is disrespecting Scotland, because they always make the mistake in their heads that Ian Blackford represents Scotland in some way that like a Labour MP doesn't, or a Tory MP doesn't, or a Lib Dem MP doesn't. Because for the SNP supporters, of course, the SNP is equivalent to Scotland and Scotland is equivalent to the SNP. And so that's how they're always making mistakes about reality, because they can't separate those two things in their heads. Anyway, we do our best to try to make them understand that the SNP is not Scotland and Scotland is not the SNP. Thank goodness, eh? Thank goodness for that. Welcome to Peter, and also welcome to Catherine. Tommy liked that. Bill says, did you hear about the Scottish nationalists burning the flag? Why wasn't he arrested? Any other flag would be a hate race crime. We heard about it. We know the individual. We know of the individual, but we tend not to give that person any publicity. And we hope for the best for his particular health in that regard. But yes, it's a kind of silly thing that he did, certainly. Thankfully, he did it way out in the middle of nowhere, where nobody could see it anyway. So other than people who put it onto the internet. And so when these people do silly things like that, we don't want to give them the oxygen of publicity, so we just ignore it. Philo on TikTok says, what's your job? This is my job, sir. I am a full-time unionist superhero. And some other comments coming in. What kind of comedy genre is this? This is unionist comedy, is the new genre. Taking the fool out of the Scottish National Party and its unfortunate acolytes, and those who, through no fault of their own, have been conned into believing that that's a party that they should follow. Yeah, well, in a sense, Blackford is, as Stephen says here, a great asset to us unionists. Bill says people who might burn a saltire would be on STV News. Well, that's certainly true, but thankfully nobody does that. But I know what you mean about the double standards, Bill. That's certainly for sure. Malwina says it's all good here. Everything is fine and healthy. Well, thank goodness. And down in Englandshire, they are being relieved of having to wear masks from tonight at midnight. And but up here in Scotland, of course, we still have to wear legally masks on public transport, and theoretically when you go into certain shops and also into certain pubs and restaurants, especially if those pubs and restaurants hold that thought. But we still have to wear masks as a symbol of submission to the Scottish state. And of course, Nicola Sturgeon will continue that for as long as she can possibly get away with it, because it gives her a thrill. It gives her a thrill to be able to tell the citizens of Gotham, you must follow my instructions. You must wear a mask as a symbol of your submission to my greatness. Essentially, that's what's going on here in Scotland. And as George Galloway put it very well, that's also because she wants to differentiate the Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom. She wants to make it look like we're a different country, a foreign country, doing our own thing, regardless of how silly that might be. And indeed, you can't watch STV News these days, or what we would call SNP TV News, because they are essentially, I'm going to say it, they're a mouthpiece for the nationalist government, And indeed, if Sturgeon didn't exist, there wouldn't be anything for the SNP TV, otherwise known as STV, to talk about. Imagine, what did they talk about before devolution? I have absolutely no idea, because there was nothing to fill their programme with. SNP TV news, absolutely, absolutely. Well, there's certainly some of these, some of the First Minister at a funeral or a Green MSP in a pub. They've been certainly caught not wearing a mask. That's true. Alan says, did the masterpiece of a flag arrive? Alan, we've not been to... It has arrived, but we haven't seen it yet because it's arrived at a different address that we haven't got to. But thank you for suggesting that. As soon as we see it, we'll get back to you when we know what it is. Derek Hartley says, finally seeing a force for good. Not seen anyone for a long time due to mornings working or when I was on night shift. Good to see you, Alistair, and good to see you, Derek. Hopefully a force for good will be having its 10th annual birthday celebration coming up in March, and we'll be telling all our supporters, all our Thin Red Line and all our regular donors about it, and you're all welcome to it, including all the viewers of this particular program. We've got we're going to have a venue. It'll be easy to get to, and that's a good thing to look forward to. Middle of March in thereabouts. More about that coming up, but that'd be a good opportunity to see Derek and to see everybody else here on the actual program. Now, please do share this if you can, folks. It really does help to get our reach out. We want to get out to as many people as possible. I see many of you have been sharing on Facebook. That's really, really, really helpful. And if you can retweet it on Twitter, for example, with a positive quote comment, then what we can then do is we can retweet your positive quote comment to 27,000 people. So please do share it, because it's a 360 win. You retweet us, we'll retweet you. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, please do hit that subscribe button and get the word out, because we have to. Who are we competing with? We're competing with the SNP TV, we're competing with BBC Scotland, we're competing with all these mainstream media organisations that are never going to give us the time of day, unfortunately. And if they do give us the time of the day, then they probably backtrack and say, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to, or they'll give us the wrong time of day. So please do what you can, folks. Thanks. Andrew Peters here has got an interesting point. Why can't we give the Nationalists what they want, a referendum, with the caveat that if and when they lose, the Scottish Assembly will be dissolved once and for all? Just end this madness now. Well, that's a nice thought. A nice thought. What we would have to do is certainly win by even more than we won last time. We won by approximately 11 percentage points last time. We'd need to win by more for that sort of thing to start getting on the table. And Steve-O says, can't beat GB News. That's so true. What would we do without GB News? We're hearing stuff now. I mean, we're hearing stuff on GB News that you won't hear on the mainstream channels at all. I mean, so thank goodness that is the one good thing, as we've said, that came out of last year. Somebody there on TikTok says that they think it was rigged last time in 2014. Well, it was rigged by the truth. It was the truth that rigged that. That's for certain, if the truth can indeed rig anything. Andrew Donald said the mainstream media will never give you or any other airtime. Simple as. Well, that's right. That's why we're building our digital platforms worldwide, as we like to say. Good to see AR Entertainment in the house again. What do you think of a nationalist group burning Union Jacks at Bannockburn? Not very much. And in fact, the nationalist group, it was like 3 people, and they're well known to everybody as the sort of 3 stooges of the Scottish nationalist movement. So no, big shakes, really, at the end of the day. Well, obviously, we don't like to see that. That's just ignorant, because they're burning the Scottish flag. The Union Jack is the flag of Scotland. It's one of Scotland's great flags, along with the saltire. And indeed, the saltire part of the Union Jack takes up more per square inch of the flag than any other part of the flag. That's a fact. So it's actually more of a saltire than it is of any other flag, which is to say more of the St George's or St Patrick's flag. So I mean, it's basically just a saltire with a couple of other flags added onto it. That's the way we look at it. That's the way that silly twit who burned it should look at it as well. He should realise he's burning not just his heritage, but his very being as a British citizen. What a terrible thing to do. Well, yes, Stephen says even with they lost, but that was even with Salmond having control over the question, control over the time, control over the date. They still lost, exactly. And this is a good point to bring in a fantastic letter that appeared yesterday in the Herald, written by a Labour councillor called Alex Gallagher from Largs. And he pointed out that there's no economic, no historical, no cultural, no legal, no geographical, and no democratic case for separation. And I'm just going to summarise his brilliant letter, which is going to become a classic of all time. We're going to be referencing this as often as we possibly can. He says Nicola Sturgeon is reported to be once again setting the timetable for a referendum bill in the next few weeks. It seems to me the reason that Miss Sturgeon concentrates on the process of independence is because she knows there is no credible case for independence itself. So what he's saying is she concentrates on the process rather than actually making a case for it. She indulges in displacement activity in place of effective action. There is no economic case for Scottish independence. Every effort to produce one runs into the sands of hard facts and evidence, which shows clearly that Scotland benefits from pooling and sharing within the UK to the tune of around 15 billion annually, and would be so much poorer after separation. And the EU will not ride to the rescue of a country with such a large deficit, without its own currency, without central bank, and with few foreign reserves. So the EU's not going to help us out. And then he points out there's no historical case because Scotland's not a colony and it's not suppressed in any way as part of the UK. And we've benefited greatly, of course, and we continue to benefit greatly from being part of Great Britain and the United Kingdom. There is no cultural case because the lives and attitudes of city dwellers in Aberdeen or Glasgow are little different from the same people in Birmingham, Bristol or Cardiff. Rural life in England is much the same as in Scotland or Wales. There's no legal case because the UK is a unitary state formed by the willing agreement of all parties in the Act of Union, and its legal status has never been challenged. And I'm going to develop that later on this evening when I talk about the constitutional and democratic mandate that is possessed by the British Parliament, when we talk about busting Indy myths in a few moments. And there's no geographical case because we're 65 million people crammed onto a small island. The very idea of splitting up into different countries in a world where size and influence matters could serve as the very definition of foolishness. And importantly, there is no democratic case. We had our referendum. The outcome was decisive and should put the question to bed for at least a generation. Instead of continually distracting the faithful with referendums that never happen, Miss Sturgeon should be considering why, after 90 years in existence, her party has dismally failed to create even the semblance of an evidence-led case for independence. Let me give her a clue. There is no such case. It does not exist. It never has. Well, that was causing a meltdown yesterday, no doubt, in several minds when they read that. What a fantastic letter. Well done. And we put it up there. If you want to read it, it's on our Facebook page and you can see it there. Great letter. Great letter. Um, David David Cameron said after his meeting with Salmon that he had to count his fingers on the way out, that he was that much of a slimy man. I didn't know that. Well, talking about David Cameron, it's time for a new section of our programme, which is called Funny Tweet Time. Funny Tweet Time. And this is where we note pretty funny tweets and we think, that's good, we have to spread this around. And first up in Funny Tweet Time was 2 days ago, when Nadine Dorris, who's a member of the cabinet, and she put out a tweet, which I'll just bring up on the screen in a minute, about ostensibly about being careful not to buy tickets from ticket touts at concerts. And she illustrated it with a picture of David Cameron. And she says here, whether it's a major music festival, sporting event or concert, it's important that people pay a fair price to see the events they love. Please remain vigilant when considering to buy from ticket touts. Guidance is available if you are unsure. And she illustrated it with a perfect picture of David Cameron looking like a ticket tout. And that had 1,300 retweets. So that certainly got around. And it was funny to see how that was received, because most of the people, most of what you might call maybe the Labour or leftists, were like, she's a member of the cabinet, she's disrespecting her position by making fun of David Cameron, she should grow up. Yes, as if they have any sense of propriety about those things. In other words, they thought that's funny, but I'm not going to laugh about it because that would be giving Nadine Dorris too much credibility. But that is a funny tweet. Another tweet which we put out, which we saw, was a story that connected the unusual shall we say partners, the unusual collaborators of Right Said Fred, the 90s pop group, Rangers fans, and the SNP. And it's here. Scottish Daily Express, Right Said Fred, back Rangers fans, SNP protest. I mean, how unlikely would you think that would be? And we've written up there, what a time to be alive. And in fact, if you go to the article, which I'll just bring up here, and I'll just read it, what all of that is about. Basically, it's Right Said Fred back Rangers fans SNP protest. 90s pop stars Right Said Fred have struck up a bizarre alliance with Rangers fans. Well, that's maybe putting it a little bit too far, but supporters of the Ibrox club held up banners criticising the Scottish administration's handling of the COVID crisis at Friday night's game against Stirling Albion. Many football fans feel picked on after Nicola Sturgeon imposed harsh restrictions on attendance at matches after Christmas, despite no data supporting the action. Members of the Union Bears fan club held up banners on Friday that said, "No science, only tyranny," as well as a derogatory message to the SNP. Well, it was certainly a derogatory message. It was a naughty word directed at the SNP. And Right Said Fred tweeted that picture of the protest to their 99,000 Twitter followers with the caption, quote, "People are done with this BS." Well, that's for certain. And Right Said Fred, made up of brothers Fred and Richard Fairbrass, enjoyed 4 top 5 singles in the early 90s, as well as a number 1 with Deeply Dippy. They have become known for their controversial anti-mask and anti-V views. Many fans backed the banners and backed Right Said Fred's views. One said, "Glad people are seeing the light. SNP are a one-trick pony." And they lost the referendum as well. Yes, indeed they did. Another said, "Cannot see the Scots voting for independence. Now they see what the SNP are all about." Let's hope that person is correct. However, not everyone was pleased with one with one almost certainly government operative from a nudge unit saying blabbity blabbity blah blah blah. So that's the Right Said Fred collaboration with the Ibrox fans. What a time to be alive. And what's the third in our funny tweets? Yes, this is incredible. You will not believe this, right? The Scottish misgovernment tweeted out a Gaelic message yesterday on the day of Burns Day, but rather than using Burns's surname, they used the Gaelic word for a burn that you would get from heat or fire. And Roger Hutchinson here says, so glad the Scottish government has a salaried Gaelic officer who trusts Google Translate to know the difference between heat burns and the surname Burns, which led Molly Nolan, who's a Lib Dem, to retweet that saying, a very happy third degree Burns night to you all. A very happy third degree Burns night. Indeed. Well, you know, we're paying enough for those people to have like an easy job in the Scottish executive, so you'd think they would at least know the language that they're meant to be translating. Anyway, that's too much to ask for these days, unfortunately. But talking about Burns, yesterday was Burns Day, and of course, as you know, we like Burns because he had many unionist tendencies. Above all, of course, he was simply an artist and a poet. Or I learned a new word yesterday, a versifier. A versifier. Isn't that a great word? I learned that yesterday, versifier. I'm going to start using that instead of poet. Anyway, he was a great versifier. And one of his favourite verses was this one, which I'll just put up right now. Be Britain still, to Britain true, among ourselves united, for never but by British hands shall British wrongs be righted. And that sums it up, and that's from his poem, The Dumfries Volunteers. And we wrote an article about Robert Burns' sense of Britishness, and you'll find that in the comment thread on our Facebook and Twitter threads just now. And he of course also wrote the poem about the couplet wherein he says that the one about the gold, such a parcel bought and sold for English gold, such a parcel of rogues in a nation. And that's gone through time. And if it wasn't for that little couplet, the Union would probably be quite different. So he did actually damage the Union with that little couplet, which wasn't actually accurate. It wasn't accurate anyway. And we've shown that as well in another article where we point out that the parcel of rogues theory is complete nonsense. What it would have been would be good, clever nationalist propaganda at the time, because the Scottish nationalists today, as back then, they're always at it. Okay, they're always making up stuff, and they're always bending the truth. And back then they were bending it just as much as they bend it today. We've shown in our article No Parcel of Rogues, which again you'll find in the comments section, that in fact the money that they're talking about there was a small amount, and it was only given to a very small number of the members of the Parliament at the time, and it was actually owed to them anyway in wages, and many of the people who received it, they didn't change their vote either way. And so that's been something that was seized on by a particular Jacobite at the time, actually, who himself didn't make a big thing of it, but it was seized on by others as a consequence after. But we lay that out in our article, No Parcel of Rogues, and we're going to develop that point further this summer when we release our special edition of Union Heart, which will be specifically on the Union of 1707 in this, the 315th year of its successful existence. Now, time for British History Matters. And this is the time when we focus on something that happened in this day in British history. We big it up, we recall it to memory, and it helps us to understand where we've come from, who we are, and where we might be going. And indeed, it helps us to have some kind of sense of there being a past that we are somehow connected to, that we're not just random creatures in the atmosphere, that we actually have a connection with others going right back. So that's what we're going to do right now. Now, several things happened today, but what we want to focus on right now is this particular person at the top of the stairs. That chap there, who's called Charles Gordon. Now, some of you may have seen that painting by a famous Irish Unionist who was born in Dublin called George William Joy. Anyway, who was Charles Gordon, and what was he doing at the top of those stairs about to get speared? Unfortunately, speared to death. And what it had to do with it was what's called the Siege of Khartoum. Now, Khartoum is the capital of the Sudan, and the Sudan's always kicking off, and it was kicking off back then as well in 1885. This day, 1885, all hell was breaking loose in Khartoum. And it's all hell's breaking loose as well. Murder, mayhem, and lewd behaviour, as they say in the Sudan. These days, there was a military coup 3 months ago, and people are getting shot on the street and everything like that. It's all tragic. Anyway, back to 1882, and there was a British-Egyptian war, and Britain won it. And Britain won it. And as a consequence, Egypt became what's called a British protectorate. Now, a protectorate is not a colony, it's just a country that the British look after, but it itself has a great deal of national autonomy. And that was the case with Egypt, right up from 1882 until 1914 at the break. Now, the competition were coming up directly after this. Now, what was happening at the time was there was the Mahdists who followed the Mahdi, who is a messianic figure in Islamic theology. Self-proclaimed Mahdi, Muhammad Ahmed, roused all the Mahdists against Egyptian rule. And Gladstone, who was the British Prime Minister at the time, just wanted it to be left to the Egyptians. But unfortunately, the Mahdists got the upper hand, and so Gladstone sent Charles Gordon to Khartoum in order to evacuate the British forces and also the Egyptians. Charles Gordon had been a previous Governor General of the Sudan, so he knew his way about. But when he got there, what he preferred to do was basically start to re-administer the city of Khartoum again and basically fight the Mahdists, which was not his mission. His mission was to evacuate. Anyway, time moved, and basically it moved against Charles Gordon, and he found himself and the British and the Egyptians besieged in Khartoum from March 84 right through to January 85, until this day in 1885, when in the final showdown the Mahdists overran the place. And according to his manservant Kali Aga Orfali, both him and Gordon fought on those stairs, and Gordon got a spear through his shoulder, and then he got another spear, and then he got a machete, almost chopped his right leg off, at which point his servant got knocked out, and when he awoke, he found Gordon's body beheaded with his head chopped off. So Gordon was, of course, a great soldier, and so then no doubt that was the way that he would prefer to go. If you're going to go as a soldier, that's certainly the way to go, getting chopped up, basically. But those were the days, and that was the Sudan. And the story has been told in this film, Khartoum, which stars Charlton Heston, of all people, as Gordon, and Laurence Olivier as Muhammad Ahmed. I've not seen this film. If anybody's seen it, please tell me if it's any good. It lasts for 2 hours 10 minutes. Sorry to give away the ending, by the way. So basically what happened as a consequence of that was the British left, but they didn't forget, and 11 years later they were back, led by Herbert Kitchener, and he consequently obliterated and decimated and destroyed the Mahdists at the Battle of Omdurman. And that had a lot to do with the invention of the machine gun. But they certainly got beaten, but it took 11 years before the British went back in. And in Dad's army, Private Lance Corporal Jones in Dad's army, he was meant to have fought at the Battle of Omdurman. So that was Gordon, perished on this day. There he is there, about to meet his fate at the age of only 51 as well. Goodness me. So in a minute or two I'll ask a question about that for this prize. Good to see all the comments coming in. Thanks very much. Bill says, where's Adam Bray? He doesn't seem to be on tonight. Maybe he'll make himself known. Raymond says, is your office in Glasgow open weekdays? And can I purchase a hoodie? I'm afraid we don't have the hoodies in stock to purchase over the counter, Raymond. But what you'll find the link to the hoodie store in the Facebook comment thread there. I'm afraid you have to do it online via our digital platform. Ian says they don't like it Upham. That's correct, and I was reading today that phrase, they don't like Upham, which was from Lance Corporal Jones in Dad's army, and also another phrase that Lance Corporal Jones had to describe the Mahdists have been, if not actually taken out of the Dad's army programs, they come in certain formats with a warning before you watch it in case you're offended by the language. I found that's quite funny, that really. Being offended by the language in a comedy. Nelson says, please put me in a time machine and take me back to the 70s. Well, what did you like particularly about the 70s? It was an interesting decade, but I only remember it as a decade when cars didn't start, which was a real problem, by the way, when your car never started. You used to get out in the morning, especially on a cold morning in the winter, and it's like, am I going to get to school? Am I going to get to work? Is it going to work? And usually it didn't work. It was, and then it all changed very quickly. Cars started working in the 80s. It was a great decade. Get into a car, switch it on, boom, you're away. Nowadays you never hear of a car not starting. Incredible. Mike says, thank you, A Force for Good, for your continuous campaign to preserve the Union. Absolutely. Preserve, maintain, promote, strengthen, develop. All of these things. Now, please I'm going to ask a question here, a very simple question based upon what I was talking about earlier. Please send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk. Well, contact@aforceforgood.uk. Please do that. It's easy to do. If you haven't entered it before, do it just now. Just bring up your email system and get ready to fire off your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and you'll get this fantastic little tin, a Union Jack tin, which can be used to keep small things in. And it's luxury, extra strong luxury mints, and we've had other tins of these, and they're really nice, really nice, really nice. So please do fire in your answer to the question at contact@aforceforgood.uk. Very simple question, very simple question. On this day in 1885, General Charles Gordon was killed in action. In which city in Sudan? In which city in Sudan was he killed in action? And I think we gave you a clue there when we showed you the video. Good stuff, good stuff. Okay, now let's... Nelson comes back with his 70s. Glam rock, things he likes about the 70s. Glam rock, that's good, yeah. Youth clubs, yeah. Brilliant, no-nonsense football, that's for sure, wasn't it? Almost fantastic. I used to love football back in the 70s. And no political correctness, that's true, yeah. It was a great time to be a kid, Alistair. I remember it. It was good. It was good. It had its negative elements. There's so many IRA bombs as well. I mean, the 70s were just like terrible for that. That was bad. But other than that, as you say, it was great as far as the music was concerned, and youth clubs, a lot of that, yeah, and good football. And yeah, good. Okay, let's get rid of that. Contact@aforceforgood.uk. Looking at TikTok here. Okay. And Ross Andrews says he enjoyed the punk rock, British-made punk rock in the 1970s. That's right. Yeah, well, now what it is time for the next part of our programme, which is called Busting Indie Myths. Busting Indie Myths. And this is Busting Indie Myths Part 3. Now, Busting Indie Myths Part 3. Because the SNP is the biggest party within well, let me start again. Because the SNP is the biggest party from Scotland at Westminster, their supporters will always say that Westminster, or the government at Westminster, has no mandate to govern Scotland. What do they mean by that? Well, a mandate means, quote, authority to carry out a policy. So to suggest that the Parliament and the government duly formed after a general election does not have a mandate to govern a part of the United Kingdom is constitutional and democratic nonsense, as I am about to explain. And it's also dangerous nonsense, because it's suggesting that the constitutionally and democratically convened Parliament and the government which is formed as a consequence is somehow illegitimate. Indeed, you'll hear that language from some of the wilder elements of the SNP, including their MSPs, including their MPs and their supporters in the media. Well, here's the truth. The British Parliament has both a constitutional and a democratic mandate. That is, it has an authority to govern for all parts of the United Kingdom. It has a mandate for unity. Parliament has a mandate for unity, a constitutional one and a democratic one. Now, constitutional means relating to an established set of principles governing a state. And the established constitutional principle here is that every single person in Scotland who voted at the general election for a person to go to Westminster and to sit in that Union Parliament was giving direct authority to that person to go there and govern for all of the United Kingdom. By voting to send someone to Westminster, whether that person is elected or not, and whether that person is for or against Westminster, by doing that, by voting for them to go to Westminster, you are explicitly giving direct authority to that entire Parliament, which is eventually formed to govern on your behalf. That is the constitutional principle which holds the UK together, and it is the constitutional principle which holds all democratic states together. And if you don't want them to govern for you, then what you do is you would vote for an abstentionist, that is someone who will not actually go to the Parliament. And by doing that, you are making your opposition to it known. That's the way that you do it. And so if you voted for that person to go, you are giving them a constitutional mandate to govern on your behalf, regardless of who they are. Secondly, the Union Parliament, the British Parliament, the Westminster Parliament has a democratic mandate. It has democratic authority. Because how's that measured? It's measured this way. The majority of people who voted at the general election in 2019 did so for parties which want the UK to stay together. The majority of people who voted in Scotland in 2019 voted for parties who want to keep the UK together. Now, a majority of MPs for that principle were not elected. The SNP had the majority of MPs, but that's just the way that the first past the post system works. It didn't change, and it doesn't change the fact that a majority of people in Scotland voted for parties that want to keep the UK together. So Westminster has that democratic authority as well. So to conclude, as we said in our magazine Union Heart, our 40-page magazine, and you'll find the link to that in the comment thread. As we said, the British Parliament has an absolute moral, constitutional and democratic right, responsibility and duty to say no to a second referendum and yes to a united Britain. It is entirely proper for the British Parliament and the Prime Minister and Government to stand for the integrity, stability and security of the UK. It is entirely moral, constitutionally legitimate, democratic and necessary for the British Parliament to avoid endangering the future of the UK by granting another referendum. So, ladies and gentlemen, the British Parliament and the government which it forms has a mandate, a constitutional mandate and a democratic mandate to govern on behalf of all of the United Kingdom, including Scotland. So that's Busting Indie Myths 3. And next week we'll be back with Busting Indie Myths 4. And every week this year we're going to bust another indie myth in 2 or 3 minutes so that by the end of the year we're going to have a great back catalogue of indie myths busted, lying on the floor. So if you're a Scottish nationalist, get to higher ground, because we are going to flood you with facts. Okay, let's look at some of the comments that are coming in. This week, by the way, we put out 3 new podcasts, which are taken from our 10-hour union telethon when we interviewed 10 people. And we've taken 3 of the interviews which were particularly good. One with Ben Irvine speaking about the present COVID carry-on. One with Will Podmore, who is the author of this book, Capability Britain, which is about how to make Britain successful after Brexit. And also one with Chris Brett of the Nelson Society, speaking about the woke attack on Nelson. 3 podcasts, each of them lasting for about 40 minutes, really packed with information, packed with knowledge. You can see them by going to our website, forceforgood.uk, and clicking on more, and that will bring up our podcast programs and go to our programs from last year. We'll also put the links up to those podcasts in the comment thread as well. But they're really good podcasts that you'll really enjoy. So please do check them out. Bust indie myths and burst the SNP bubble, says Raymond. Stephen says, that telethon was epic. I could not believe how quick the time went. Fantastic. Well, thank you for your engagement during that time, Stephen. It was certainly good. Catherine says, I watched the telethon today. Good, wonderful. Well, it's still up there, and it will be up there for forevermore on our digital platforms. I love saying that. Broadcasting across all our digital platforms. I actually nicked that from GB News. That's what they say, so I'm going to say it as well. Because we're doing exactly the same thing, right? We've just got a smaller reach than they've got. They're broadcasting across all their digital platforms. They've got more viewers, but we're broadcasting across all our digital platforms at the same time. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. Mike Jones says, Union Heart is an excellent magazine. I urge you all to purchase a copy. Thank you for that, Mike. That's a great thing. That will help us to sell more of these. It's only a £5. But it is in fact an education. We encourage people to buy one and buy a second one for their local MP. And look at that picture. That's an AFFG original picture that we took. That's the index page. It's worth it just for that alone. Wow. There's a heart in the background there. So, Jack White says, busting indie myths is the best thing about these streams, in my opinion. Keep it up, Alistair. Thank you, Jack. Thank you. We absolutely intend to. Raymond says, thank you for defending the Union and for giving such good reason. Catherine also agrees that best music was in the 1970s. Wasn't some of the music was just amazing. They were discovering melodies that hadn't ever been found in the history of the world. And by the 1980s, almost all the melodies had been found. I know that sounds silly, but it's kind of true. And then by the time we've got to here, it's, I don't know, it's very rarely you'll find an absolutely new melody. Although sometimes you will find songs that it's just like, oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Never heard of, like, I thought that genre was finished, and then suddenly a song comes up and you're like, that's incredible. I've only had that experience once or twice, and the last time was listening to Sabaton and Bismarck. Listen to Bismarck by Sabaton and you're just like, whoa, that's incredible. I thought heavy metal was, I thought you couldn't do anything new with it until they came along. Totally apropos of nothing, as they say. Yes, was it maybe Ian Blackford who ate all of Boris Johnson's birthday cake? We perhaps won't know. The Metropolitan Police are looking into it. Yeah, well, do we have... Okay, do we have a winner? Do we have a winner of our competition? Let's hope that we do have a winner, and we do have a winner. We do have a winner. So let's put up our we have a winner. We have a winner, and the winner is Thomas Mowat. Good for you, Thomas. These will be winging its way to you. Winging its way to you. Well done. We'll get those in the post to you tomorrow. Fantastic. Fantastic. Do you have, Thomas, do you have one of these? If you don't, we'll put one of these in the post for you as well. Or if you want another, just tell us and we'll also put that in the post for you. Just give us just tell us just now if you'd like that again, or if you don't even have it. But you've got a free copy waiting for you if you want it. Debbie says, congrats, Thomas. And Stephen says, well done, Thomas. Thomas says that he's got these. Good. Well done, Thomas. Yeah. Good. Okay, we'll send that to you anyway tomorrow, Thomas. Good stuff. Now, please also, folks, check out our wee book for the Union. This is what keeps us going day to day. Keeps us going. A wee book for the Union. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about here is built upon this. And you can get both of these together. You can get both of these together for a discount. Get both of them together for a discount in our web shop. Fantastic. Okay, folk. Thanks to the folk on TikTok as well. You've been a blast. Good to read your thoughts and to get where you're coming from. Hopefully, some of you will have learned things from us on TikTok. See you all next week. Now, we're hoping next week that we'll have a guest on, because we do intend to have guests on these programs. We're just finding our feet at the moment under the new system that we're running. But next Wednesday, if things work out, we'll have a guest on. So that should be something to look forward to as well. Stephen says, no, don't go just yet. Well, I'm afraid we have to. Tommy says, great show as usual. Well, it wouldn't be the same without you, Tommy, so thank you very much as well for everything that you do for the cause. You're welcome, Tommy. You're welcome. Folks, it's been a blast. We'll be back, as we say, next Wednesday, same time. Tell your friends, tell everybody you know. Please share the stream. And thank you to everybody who has commented. It just remains for me to say, as always, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen. See you next week.